A New Hope, Nier Chapter 92b and 93. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of Azazyel's stories. My lady, that's not at all needed. I can have dash. Cinder tried to speak, but Salem pushed her will into the seer, and before Cinder could react, the seer on the other end slapped her across the face with one of its many tentacles, as the seer was in the shape of a floating jellyfish with dozens of wrist-thick tentacles that could shatter the limbs of huntsmen with aura reinforcement. A moment of silence filled the magical call before Salem spoke with just a tiny amount of anger in her voice, but that spark of anger sent chills down Cinder's spine. Cinder, I hear your little pet Emerald is a bit younger than you and has an even more useful semblance. Make sure to train her a bit in how to use your maiden powers. It would be highly convenient for me if after Tyrion kills you for failing me again, he can bring your gaslit little orphan back to me for re-education. Salem bluntly said as she ended the call with Cinder fall. 93. Apparently screaming into Jeanne's fantastic chest earned me no favors, though she wasn't exactly mad but more amused as she knew that the androids were talking about weird crap I didn't exactly believe in. Anyway, let's get going back to Beacon with the satellites, foundry, and mining bots now in orbit. It's just a waiting game for the bots to finish building the space station and amass the resources to make higher-grade munitions. I said tiredly as we climbed into the modified flight units that would take us back home to Beacon. As I sat down on one of the many seats and strapped myself in, the seats beside me were instantly taken by Jeanne and Weiss, with Ruby pouting in heartrending sadness. Jayaki. She all but whined pitifully as her gleaming eyes filled with threatening unshed tears to be spilt, with her especially pouting stuck-out lip as she blubbered. I wanted to ask you more questions about the laser weapons and the bigger weapons your androids are going mount on the moon. She cried out as she gave Weiss and Jeanne a dirty look. But Weiss just snapped her finger and pointed at the set of seats on the other side of the airship. Ruby, cease your questions, and just go sit down. I want to get back to Beacon, as Jake obviously needs to recover his aura as well as have studies done on its effects. But even as she said that, she leaned forward to Jeanne, who won my other side. And beyond Jake, we need to test to see how much Jeanne's semblance amplifies all the of our own semblances. Weiss finished off with Jeanne kind of twisting in her seat as all the huntresses eyed her like a juicy steak. Because she was honestly, with her ability to boost a semblance's natural potential or even skill level, as I was literally capable of opening a portal straight into the atmosphere with zero practice at such a obviously complicated thing that it bordered on insanity. Even now, with Jeanne's semblance long having faded from my system, I could feel my own gap semblance so much more clearly than I ever could. Before, it was like looking at something rushing around and just controlling its gap between movement and still being in motion. But now I could feel the gaps in so much more conceptual things, and I could only get inklings of stuff that I could only slightly control on the same level I was able to casually reach under the effects of Jeanne's semblance. I reached into my pocket, and seeing my aura was at like 20%, I took a deep breath, feeling outwards with my semblance as I peered at my sword virtuous contract that 2B gave me. The sword was a marvel of monomolecular technology, allowing the blade to carve through the thick metal of machine lifeforms and the flesh and bones of Grimm alike with no issues. But I could feel the infinite tiny imperfections within the blade, and I heard Ruby gasp as I began flipping the issues that sword had into beneficial aspects, like turning the edge of the metal into some kind of purple edge that sparked faintly with electricity as well as vibrating at an insane repeating rate. No, Ruby, you may not slobber on the sword. I grinned as I sheathed the sword and ignored Ruby's pouting howl of despair that reached the peak sound of a tea kettle boiling. Ruby is likely to smother you within a pillow to steal your weapon, Jake. Jeanne joked, making Weiss scowled and go to refute before freezing. Maybe Ruby should sleep with her sister's team for a couple nights. Weiss hesitantly brought up as Pyrrha just rolled her eyes. Oh, stop bullying her, she is obviously curious as to what in the world Jake did somehow change his weapon via his semblance. Pyrrha said, looking at me expectantly, and for a moment I considered hiding the sheer volume of my semblance. But I realized these girls had already grown into a sort of family for me. I mean, we lived together at this point for a couple months, ate together, slept together both literally and metaphorically, and most importantly, if I could trust my life in their hands during a mission, I could trust them with my semblance, as I already told them about me being a foreigner to this world. The proper name of my semblance is called boundary manipulation. It allows me to find the boundaries to two concepts not things, and manipulate the gap between them. I then looked down at the sword and tapped its sheathed form on the flight unit's floor, making a thunking noise. I pulled and changed its boundaries in order to change its concept of cutting to instead become slice through. I said, putting importance on the cutting-as aspect, as conceptually this sword would now no longer need to cut anything. It would merely slice and glide through all mundane materials not protected by some kind of magic. And then came the hard question as Ruby tilted her head. Then couldn't you manipulate the boundary between life and death, pulling someone back from the dead either by their souls or just reversing time to the point of just before they died? Ruby asked, frowning, and I froze as unbidden came the memory of how Yukari did something similar at one point.